Okay, first thing I need to know is how much do you weigh? 165. What I'm doing is I'm taking your weight and I'm going to give you theoretical ounces of alcohol.
Okay.
Let's say in a night. So let's give you, say, 5 drinks in a night. Sound pretty good? It's going to bring your blood alcohol content up to a .081.
Is that illegal?
It's right up to the edge,
Okay.
0.10.
Not doing too well. You're supposed to stay between those orange cones. And remember, I'm only half as drunk as Henri Paul. Later, the computer escalates my drunkenness, and I crash. Dr. Wecht, Dr. Cyril Wecht, along with Jane O'Donnell, an automotive safety expert, join us at our Mercedes. Again, this is the American version of the Mercedes 280S. One of the deep suspicions, Cyril, is that Henri Paul, in this accident that took place in a tunnel out of anyone's sight, was not drunk, but either was bathed by the antifreeze in the coolant system of the Mercedes, or indeed had alcohol somehow poured over him to make it appear as if he were drunk. Could either of those scenarios have been?
No, absolutely not, Geraldo. The radiator fluid, if it did spill on him, would not have gotten into his circulatory system, and in any event, it doesn't make any difference if it had in some way, because what it contains, ethylene glycol and maybe a little bit of propylene glycol, are readily and clearly distinguished in the toxicological analyses from ethyl alcohol, which is what we're dealing with when we talk about booze. The other big issue, which had more possible credibility, was whether or not the specimen that was taken was contaminated from gastric contents. In other words, did some alcohol present in his stomach spill out through a torn stomach or a torn esophagus food pipe, get into blood that had collected in the chest cavity, and then if the pathologist doing the autopsy had taken that specimen, then it could have been admixed and given you a much higher level of alcohol. And while that remained in doubt for a while, to my knowledge, it has been completely dispelled, because Dr. Peter Venesis, whom I know personally, is an outstanding forensic pathologist in London, a consultant to the Al-Fayed family, went in and they did a third test, and Peter is perfectly satisfied that it is a valid reading. And you have 3 readings of .183, .175, and .182, as I understand it. So those levels, Geraldo, are more than twice what you had in that simulated recreation, a very significant level. And I don't care what anybody says about how Henri Paul looked in terms of walking and talking. People who have been drinking for a while can fool you if you just look at how do they walk across the room or how do they talk to you seated at a table. That has nothing to do with your sensory perception and your motor coordinative skills in driving a car. Quite a different thing.
Jane, tell us about road rage and why it is in some way reminiscent of what happened here.
Yeah, this was a very similar crash to what's happening all the time in the United States. What becomes the important thing is how the driver of the second car responds to the aggression, the provocation that's coming from the other drivers. You can say what you will about the paparazzi and how their role in this, and I certainly wouldn't condone it, but I think by speeding up to get away from them, even if he were stone cold sober, he would have been creating a much more dangerous situation. When you add that incredible amount of alcohol in his system, it was a recipe for disaster. When Princess Di and Dodie and the driver didn't buckle up, they pretty much sealed their fate.
They sealed their fate. Robin, there is all this talk now of a second car, this mystery Fiat. Now they're scraping for paint. Right. You were there 2 to 3 minutes after the disaster. By your estimation, you were there certainly before the ambulance and before most of the cops. Did you see a second vehicle that may or may not have been involved?
Okay.